With the recent end of the sequel trilogy, we're in a unique world state. That being one where we get to speculate about what the future holds. We know the next trilogy will follow Rey and the New Jedi Order, we just don't know what that entails. So I'd like to toss out a pitch for what I believe can be achieved within those specific parameters. We'll start by establishing the setting, then explore the characters, and finally outline a synopsis for the bones of what this new chapter of Star Wars can hold. Now then, let's kick things off with where we are. It's been 15 years since
Somehow Palpatine returned.
and the galaxy has definitively changed. The New Republic was shattered by the First Order, but what's emerged from the ashes is the Union. A successor to the Republic that maintains mainstays like a Senate, but has replaced the Supreme Chancellor with a less powerful, more accountable Prime Minister, who is currently Borsk Vayela, a New Republic senator turned First Order senator turned Prime Minister, or in other words, an institutionalist and career politician. This new government also features a new Jedi Order, but we'll get into the specifics of that particular organization later. For now, let's delineate the Galactic Order, because the Union isn't the only major player. In fact, in the wake of the First Order's fall, the galaxy has been effectively carved up. The Union is much smaller than any of its predecessors, with borders that are considerably tighter and a military that is much less prominent. Instead of actively pursuing recruitment, the Union relies heavily on veterans like Wolf Sazin, a no-nonsense and pessimistic pilot/infantryman who has a role to play in what's to come. A desire and subsequent rush towards peace has caused the Union to forego control of much of what was once Republic space, meaning other actors have entered the field. The first we'll get into is the smallest and most loosely collected. Along the Outer Rim exists the Hutt Consortium, which has expanded its reach in the wake of the First Order's fall. Said expansion has been largely engineered by two things. 1. A repurposing of old droids from decades past, and rebirth of a program that once allowed the Trade Federation to threaten the Republic, albeit at a far more modest scale, and 2. A rising star in the criminal underworld. Zizor, a fallen prince who lost everything after choosing the wrong side in the past war. The Consortium is a string of tangentially tied territories that are collected not as much by force as they are by wealth. The Hutts aren't warlords after all, unless they have to be. Their preference is to instead operate within the realm of trade. Real estate, gun running, spice. The threat here isn't the hired thug at your door with a gun, it's your landlord, who also owns the house of the hired thug. The next faction we'll meet is the most familiar. The Second Order was forged by the disparate remnants of the First. As Palpatine was getting zapped for the third time in a row, his underlings were consolidating their power. But division would inevitably beget defeat, so a deal has been struck. As such, what's formed is a tenuous alliance of what are effectively city-states spread across a sector of the galaxy, making a sum greater than its parts. Also, side note, if you're wondering why this coalition was allowed to exist, consider the military might of the First Order beyond what was destroyed at Exegol. In order to topple these scattered forces, the Resistance would have had to essentially commit to a war that continued for years. So, the nascent Union, in an attempt to avert such a conflict, conceded ground and allowed the Second Order to be born. The aristocracy of the Second Order consists of military leaders turned warlords turned nobles. Consider someone like Admiral Natasi Dalla, a prominent figure in this saga, who rose through the ranks of the First Order before eventually winning her own territory via strength of arms. She's only one of many, and with such a large plethora of specifically battle-minded tacticians at the head of this league, battling them would at best cost a generation of lives and at worst result in defeat. This realm of space is closer in nature to the Empire than the Republic, obviously, but something unique about this Imperial successor is its attitude towards the Force. See, the leaders of the Second Order believed that the ultimate failing of the Empire and First Order wasn't necessarily their politics, but their leadership, which was solely focused upon a cult of personality around one Force-sensitive figure, whose flaws inevitably spread throughout the entire government to eventually collapse it. So, in contrast to its forebears, the Second Order is staunchly anti-Force. No Jedi, no Sith, no nothing. If a citizen is discovered to be Force-sensitive, they're not made into a weapon, as one would think. They're essentially deafened to the Force via imprisonment in a Isalamiri sanctum. Which, for those unaware what a Isalamiri is, it's basically a creature that constantly projects a bubble of non-Force energy. Lastly, we meet the newest Force in the galaxy. One that has been amassing might since before the war, and quietly expanding first under the New Republic, then the First Order, then accelerating post-war. The Mandalorian Alliance. This growing empire is forged by a new generation of Mandalorians that were either inducted or born into the standard battle-hardened ways of its people. Here exists a sector of space that has probably flourished the most post-war. Due to their previously isolationist policies and currently expansionist ones, the Mandalorians have rapidly experienced an influx of resources, worlds, and weapons. And under the leadership of the mysterious new Mandalore, the Battleborn people have accumulated power in ways previously unseen. In short order, the Mandalorians have taken in ex-stormtroopers and nomadic resistance veterans alike, offering them wealth and land for their skills and lineages. And under an aggressively forward-thinking leadership, the Alliance has mustered its power, preparing for something. In this galaxy of competing nations that determine the lives of billions, we hone in on our heroes, and explore the new Jedi Order. Master Rey Skywalker, still don't like that surname, is at the forefront of a new order, but she is not its Grandmaster. Because nobody is its Grandmaster. Maybe Rey felt like putting all that weight on one person's shoulders is what led to Luke's downfall. Or maybe she's just afraid of those burdened shoulders being her own. Either way, this order is instead ruled by an assortment of equals. Masters who, admittedly, have far less experience than ones of the past. Subsequently, the new order is a lot looser than the previous. Or previous, since we don't know anything about Luke's. Thanks, Disney. This Jedi Order has no restriction on attachment and instead actively encourages it. After all, attachment redeemed Kylo. Before killing him. And attachment breeds babies, who are more likely to be Force-sensitive. The Jedi themselves are also far less uniform in their ideals. Rey hasn't been picky about who she recruits. Anyone willing who isn't a psychopath or hard-ish criminal are allowed in, regardless of their age or degree of Force affinity. Which means we get to see ex-mercenaries, doctors, thieves, judges, janitors, and everything in between. Some members are powerful warriors, whereas others are civilians who can maybe lift a rock. But all are Jedi. This alleviation of restrictions, along with the new absence of danger for Force-sensitives post-war, except in Second Order territory, has led to an explosion of Jedi, with the new order operating in the mid to upper hundreds. There's been a moratorium on the rule of one Padawan, one Master, so flocks are taught by those with the capacity to teach, leading the order to grow exponentially. This diversity of teachers and students has subsequently led to a diversity of thought, causing factions to form amongst the order. Jedi Master and Council member Corran Horn is a Jedi older than Rey, and grew up in an isolated sanctuary away from the First Order and New Republic. After emerging from hiding to join Rey's new order, he's quickly become the de facto leader of the Traditionalists, who believe in the teachings of the Old Order. So no attachment, suppressed emotions, all that jazz. Whereas Jedi Knight Nomi Sunrider, one of Rey's first and strongest pupils, is a member of the Revolutionaries, who believe in the superiority of Force sensitives and advocate for pushing the boundaries of what a Jedi can and cannot do, both in terms of law and in terms of light and dark side. This is a bed ripe for philosophical debate, and one Rey wrestles with as cracks in the galaxy threaten to shatter its fragile peace. Said debate and its effects are explored in real time via Rey's apprentice, Ferris Olin, a former prince and current Padawan. Ferris is relatively weak in the Force when it comes to standard applications like telekinesis or visions, but exceptionally talented at more esoteric abilities like illusions and animal taming. He also struggles to determine what path to take as a Jedi, atop struggling with insecurities around his strength when compared to powerhouses like Rey and Nomi. Three of our Jedi will be together for this new story, at least at the beginning, and act as our leads during the advent of this trilogy, which centers around a summit to negotiate the borders and treaties maintaining the de facto truce between the major factions of the universe. But said summit, and the events surrounding it, will bring our cast into conflict with threats inside and out. Because close to the summit, and in Second Order space, exists a newly constructed Asala Miri prison that holds Force-sensitive prisoners. And upon discovery of this, Nomi, who was raised as a slave under the First Order, decides to raid the compound and free the prisoners, while dragging a hesitant Rey and conflicted Ferris with her as backup, along with Wolf Sazin as a pilot. This breach of peace occurs as Master Corran Horn simultaneously investigates strange occurrences around the summit, discovering a covert plot to cause a galaxy-wide war. Both storylines then converge as said plot unfurls, and as Rey and Nomi's mission, successful or not, damages an already brittle peace, the Mandalorians make their move, triggering a new conflict that will shape the fate of everyone and everything. That is the crux of this story, a three-way war between the Union, Second Order, and Mandalorian Alliance. A war the Hutts conveniently endorse and benefit from. A war some Jedi, like the Traditionalists, want no part in, for fear of either wiping out their order or devolving it into something ugly. A war other Jedi, like the Revolutionaries, feel they must fight in order to save lives and prove themselves. And a war our heroes are caught within, whether they try to escape it or not. Such a conflict would lead to a new generation of Star Wars that, while done before in many aspects, would be new to most moviegoers. Also, side note to you non-moviegoers, I use realized and established characters from Star Wars lore, but that was merely for convenience. I'd generate new characters for this trilogy so those other ones can be used at a later date or canonized if necessary. The failure of the sequel trilogy, or one of them among many, is that its foundation was rotten. Rebels versus Empire, we've seen that already. But this conflict is fertile ground that can lead in so many different directions. Does Wolf's exposure to the other heroes crack his pessimism, or does he sink further into fatalism? Will Corran forsake the dogmatic ways of the old Jedi, or dig deeper into them? Does Nomi swing towards the dark side? Does Ferris reject Rey's teachings? Where does Rey land? Or does she not land at all and just stay in the middle? The most interesting part of Star Wars has always been the conflict within the conflict, and this story is no different. We definitively don't need Jedi and Sith again. Or Rebels versus Empire, or Good versus Evil, or even Republic versus Trade Federation. What we need is a fresh idea that catapults us into a realm of possibility. What we need is a paradigm shift away from absolutes. 'Cause, we all know the only people who deal in those. That's all for this one. Like and subscribe, because I've got more rewrites, fixes, essays, and whatnot in the works. And until the next one, cheers.